I've got a genuinely depressing video today. It's an Andrew Marr interview with the Israeli ambassador, and she doesn't take any responsibility for the murders, the slaughter of the Palestinians from Israel. It's all Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. And let's get straight into the interview because it's disgusting.
Israel Katz, Israel's defense minister, has given what he called a last warning to the people of Gaza. The airstrikes, said to have killed more than 400 people over the past 48 hours, were only the first step, he said. What is coming will be more difficult, and you will pay the price. If the hostages aren't released, Israel would evacuate people from the combat zones and then, he says, act with a force like you haven't seen before. Now, given what's already happened in Gaza, and Israeli ground troops are on the move there again already, this sounds like the final obliteration, the last demolition of Gaza as a human habitation. What Mr. Katz said himself would be total devastation. But if the hostages were returned, he said, Palestinians would have the opportunity to leave for other places in the world. I'm joined now by the Israeli ambassador to Britain,
How kind of him.
Tzipi Hotovely. Tzipi,
Hello, Andrew. Good
very
evening.
kind to have you. How kind to come into the studio. Those words sound pretty devastating. Are we at the
Genocidal language, essentially.
end of Gaza as a place where many Palestinian people live full-time?
Well, it can end today if Hamas leaders will release our hostages and will surrender after the horrific attack they committed on Israel, the most barbaric attack on Israel at the 7th of October. Everything will be over. So it sounds to me very strange that people keep on, attacking Israel when actually...
Because you've killed... We don't even know. Conservative estimates put it at 50,000. It could be in hundreds of thousands. Like, she's acting like this is a proportional response to October the 7th. It's really not. And this is the theme of it. It's always Hamas. Like, Israel have no agency. They just have to do this. They have to do this.
Actually, Hamas can end up this in a minute.
We never forget October the 7th, but we also suspect, or clearly Hamas think, that if they release the last of the hostages, Israel will just then kill them all. We'll just go after them all and slaughter everybody.
I think we don't use these terms. We are a democratic country.
You don't use them, but you do them. And this democratic country, we're the only democracy in the Middle East, therefore we can do this. Like, that's all they have. That's all they have. Slaughter potentially hundreds of thousands of innocent people. We're a democracy. We're allowed.
Cares about human rights, cares about human life.
Like, who believes this? Like, who watching this believes that Israel at the moment cares about human rights or human life? Genuinely, like, insane.
I think for many years we avoided attacking Gaza because we said, live your life peacefully.
Really? When was this? When was this?
Build a heaven from tons of...
How can you do that when you're in occupied territory? They claim they left in 2005, but they literally control what goes in and out of Gaza. Like, you have to get your birth certificate in Israel. Like, it's a controlled territory. How can they do that?
Humanitarian support you received, and in the end of the day they turned it into this hell. And let me just share with you something. Today was a very emotional day for many Israelis when they heard Eli Sharabi, a hostage that was released, coming to the UN on the most important platform in the world and basically saying those horrific things. He said, I was treated as if I was an animal. I had to beg for food. I had to beg to go to the bathroom. And then he said, I saw as an eyewitness that Hamas was looting all those boxes of humanitarian aid having UN and UNRWA logos. So we're talking here about Hamas that used the ceasefire actually to rearm and regroup to make sure that Israel would be under attack again. And Israel was under attack today, under rocket attack.
And as we see...
Okay, assuming that's true, that's horrible. And obviously the treatment of hostages isn't going to be great. But how many have Israel killed? That's the question. Like, so many innocent people are being killed here. How many have been killed by Israel? And also as well, like, obviously the treatment of the hostages is important. But what about the treatment of the Palestinians, which is way disproportionate? Like, I think it's between 95 and 97% of the deaths in this war are Palestinians. It's so disproportionate, and you've got the backing of America, the UK. It's disgusting. It's genuinely disgusting, and Israel has no agency in this. Like, it's a theme throughout this whole thing. It's all Hamas, but we know it takes two to tango.
Sit here today, though, Tzipi, the war has restarted. The war goes on. It seems to be an endless war, and more than 400 people dead in the past 48 hours, most of them women and children. That cannot be right.
To begin with, it's a human tragedy that Hamas uses its own people as human shields. I think that...
See, always deferring, it's never Israel. And yes, Hamas have used human shields, and Hamas is Gaza is a relatively small piece of land. It's like a medium-sized city. And there's a question, like, after a certain point, how many people have died? Are they actually targeting who they should be? Like, 400 people in 48 hours. Like, that's a lot of people. Like, they've got some of the most sophisticated artificial intelligence, high-end, like, kind of missiles. These mistakes should not be happening. Like, they have very precise missiles that, I'm sorry, who is convinced by this?
It's clear for everyone that Israel never targets civilians, never.
That's just simply not true. Like, I can't really, when she says that, I can't take anything she says seriously, because that's simply not true. If you look at footage of Gaza, it's been completely leveled. Like, we've got tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. There was 2 million people in Gaza. How many people of them are dead? We may never know the actual numbers. We don't even know the numbers for Iraq. People estimate between 100,000 and 200,000. I mean...
We are using all our best intelligence to make sure we're attacking the infrastructure of Hamas, we're attacking the commanders of Hamas.
It's just simply not true. They have got some of the most sophisticated technology, very precise. And they know what they're doing. They are targeting civilians, children, women, men. They know exactly what they're doing.
But they embedded themselves in their population intentionally to create these cynical images in the BBC and LBC and everywhere.
Again, no agency for Israel. It's all Hamas. Israel, no kind of responsibility for their actions. And this is fascism, by the way. Like, the pure victimhood. Like, we're being forced to do this. Like, we've not occupied this territory for since at least 67, going back to 48. No. It's we're just reacting.
To make sure that the world will take Israel as the one who's targeting those people. We're not targeting the civilians, and we need to make it clear.
Well, can I put it gently? If you're not targeting the civilians, your targeting can't be very good, because you're...
See, he has to put it gently. Like, reminds me of that famous interview with Noam Chomsky and Andrew Marr, when only certain journalists, like manufacturing consent, will be able to be in that position. And I'm sorry, you just can't. It seems like you can't criticize Israel now for what they're doing. Like, if this is like a Kremlin ghoul, he'd be going in hard, rightly so. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is slaughter. This is genocide. This is unforgivable. But he's like, oh, I have to ask gently. It's like insane, truly insane stuff.
Killing an awful lot of them.
As you know, when you...
he says that like a head teacher, oh, you seem to be killing a lot of these little babies and women. How do you feel about that? It's some of the most depressing stuff you'll see on TV.
You take your rates when you're fighting, when you were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan together with your American allies. It was clear that you had proportionally one terror or armed person for 5 civilians. Israel did in the Gaza case 1 for 1, and I think this rate, this is the one that was researched both by our...
Why should we believe what you're saying right now? Why? There's no reason for us to.
People and by very professional people like Professor Andrew Roberts. So I think it's very clear that Israel is doing what every democratic country in the world.
That's it. We're democratic, so we can do this. Like, is that like a weird dog whistle? Like, we're Democrats, so we can actually, when we slaughter brown people, actually it's okay. Like America and the UK, when they did it in Iraq and Afghanistan, she's almost saying like, oh, because you did that, we're allowed to do. Everybody recognizes Iraq and Afghanistan were probably one of the biggest mistakes of the 21st century, early 21st. Like, she's comparing it to that. Like, yeah, we know that was bad. 200,000 civilians dead. Probably the same in Gaza now. Like, what argument? She has no argument. It's indefensible. It's pure evil. It's pure evil. She is evil because what is she saying here? Like, oh, it's Hamas. Not the most sophisticated military, most funded on the planet. No, it's not them. It's the guys with little bottle rockets and, tunnels.
Would have done.
Let us agree right now, it'd be the right thing for Hamas to release all the hostages immediately.
Yeah, but how many of them are alive at this point? Israelis killed most of them.
Agree.
But if they don't, how does this end?
First of all, I think there is a responsibility here in the international community.
Yes, there is. There's a vote on it. Most people want a two-state solution. This should be like, but it's America and UK and a few other countries that constantly undermine it. Like, the consensus is clear here. Like, they need to get out. There needs to be a two-state solution. And reparations. Like, Israel need to rebuild Gaza.
The British government, the US administration is doing its best to put pressure on Hamas to release them now, not tomorrow, now. And I
what about pressure on Israel to stop genociding the Palestinian people?
think that every day we're waiting, we'll lose more life. And every day.
Just saying, like, is that saying losing hostages, or just we have to just kill these people? We just have to murder. We just have to just kill them all.
It matters. This is why this pressure is so significant. And you're asking me what if not?
Yeah.
Then unfortunately we'll be in a point where Hamas understands military pressure and we'll have to make sure Hamas won't control the Gaza Strip, which is the end game. You asked me about the end game.
In those circumstances, do we end up with a Gaza where there are simply no Palestinians left alive?
That was never the plan.
I'm not saying the plan, but is that where we...
Why would you have to say that then? That's like a negative thing when people say, like, don't do something and then your mind goes to, like, that was never the plan. Well, if it was never the plan, why would you say it was never the plan? I mean, a lot of people have been talking about, pretty genocidal intents. Are you sure it's not the plan? Because it seems like the plan.
President Trump, when President Trump came with his very out-of-the-box creative idea, he was talking about giving the Palestinians for the first time in their life the opportunity to choose, but they can only choose if Hamas won't be, doing this horrific war crimes, not just for Israel, also for its own people. So I think it's better for everyone to understand a better future for the Palestinians in Gaza will be without Hamas.
Just to remind people that the Trump plan was a kind of Riviera, I don't know what you'd call it really, but
insanely dystopian, by the way, insanely dystopian.
Kind of a strip with beaches and hotels and
cities to Riviera. Yes.
Do you like that idea? Is that a serious idea, do you think?
So I think everyone probably saw how people don't take it seriously. And I think you need to understand the heart of the idea. The heart of the idea is not the business idea. People take it whether it's going to be a Riviera or not. This is not the story. The story is basically looking at the reality in the Middle East. And I think we both can agree that the last generation, the last 25 years, were not good. They were not good for Israelis. They were not good to Palestinians. When Israel did the withdrawal 2005, and we
withdrawal, but you still got checkpoints and you still control Gaza, essentially. Like, why lie? Like, we can see it. David Cameron famously called it in 2010, it's an open-air prison. Like, the treatment of them, Palestinian people, like, they won't let journalists in. They've killed journalists. They've killed UN workers, aid workers. Just allowed to get away with it. Like, why isn't he talking about the genocide here? Why isn't he pushing back and, like, Like, it's just insane. And the media are complicit in this. The media are letting them get away with it.
Said we'll go back to the international borderline, and then we'll have peace and quiet. And we removed settlements, and we did all those things. In the end of the day, we got more radicalization in the other side. So I think the key word here is that this is...
Yeah, but you've got to look at the material conditions of radicalization. And I don't excuse it. I don't excuse the far right. I don't excuse far left or Hamas. But there's a reason why they've become radicalized since 1987, when they were a peaceful organization. At a certain point, they became radicalized, which is a complex thing, and I don't excuse it. But by killing tens of thousands of people, do you think that's the solution here? Like, do you think that's not going to radicalize the population even more against you? Like, it's nonsensical. Like,
what Trump is saying, let's change and build a new paradigm. And I think he's right.
Let's talk.
But do the Palestinians have a voice in this? You talk about democracies. I mean, no? Okay, thank you.
A bit about radicalization. Rabbi Meir Kahan, who was eventually assassinated, for a long time was a very extreme figure in Israeli politics. He was seen as somebody who thought Israel should take over Gaza, take over what we call the West Bank, full-time, forever. Are his politics now coming into the actual government? We've got Ben Gvir coming back into the government. He follows a lot of that ideology. Has that moved from the extremes to the centre of Israeli politics?
No, because I think what's happening in Israel, actually, it's not understanding Israeli politics, thinking that we're turning to some right-wing country. We're not turning to a right-wing country. We're turning...
Really? You're pretty far right. I mean, the language, the policies, like, this isn't a normal reaction to what happened on October the 7th. It really isn't. It's not just it's not justifiable. It's not proportional. Like, it's war crimes. It's genocide. It's slaughter. Like,
to a country that wants safe life to our children. This is what we're turning to be. We understood that by having a terror organization on our doorstep, we didn't allow our children to have a safe haven, what Israel was supposed to be for the Jewish people, as our homeland. And we lost that at the...
Why is it, though? Why is Israel for the Jewish people? Because the Bible said so? Why? Like, I don't like ethno-states. Not an ethno-state guy. Why is that just for Jewish people? Why? You're not entitled to that land. I'm sorry, you're not.
The 7th of October, we want to bring back security and the feeling of freedom to our children, not being under a threat of being kidnapped by a terror organization or being killed.
I hear all of that,
but isn't the Israeli state a terror organization now? By your own definition? They've kidnapped people. They've got Palestinian children, teenage boys. No? Okay. Should we, like, literally not talk about any of the actions of Israel? It's all Hamas's fault.
But, Ambassador, you know that Israeli politics are in turmoil tonight. There's been huge protests about the likely sacking of the head of Shin Bet, the security organisation, Ronan Bar. The Attorney General has said that would be against the law. And in the demonstrations outside Israeli parliament, the former head of the IDF, Moshe Yalon, is there. This is not extremists protesting against the government. This is beginning to feel like Israeli society saying this is no longer a government we support.
Well, we are democracy that loves demonstrating. So I think...
I didn't know they were a democracy. Oh, I didn't know that. They're the only democracy in the Middle East. Didn't know that.
We should be proud in the fact that everyone can express itself in Israel. Everyone can go to the streets and say what he thinks about the government.
But we won't listen to you. Is that what you're going to say?
And in no world, I would say those demonstrations shouldn't happen. They should happen. This is
it's nice of her.
Democracy. I'm proud in our democracy. And I think more than that, we have elections too often, if you ask me, but it should be once in 4 years, but we normally do it once in 3 years. And we have the democratic process works once in few years, and people will be able to say what they think about the government when it comes to time to vote. And I think this is how democracies work.
Mr. Katz, I was citing him earlier on, the defense minister, Israel Katz, was saying that if the hostages are released and tension comes out of this, then people who are living at the moment inside Gaza, Palestinians, will be allowed to go somewhere else in the world. Does anyone know where that somewhere would be? Nobody seems to want them.
First of all, it's a serious problem. If people are fighting so many years to, say they're pro-Palestinians, and in the end of the day, they're not willing to accept that, I think there is a serious problem with how much...
She smiled, the glee there, like, oh, they're pro. Like, she is a disgusting person. Like, oh, it's depressing.
Actually,
they don't necessarily want
believe in the Palestinian cause. I mean, that's very
they don't
see the glee in that face. Like, oh my God, she's...
They don't necessarily want to be expelled either.
I think...
Yeah, exactly. You shouldn't think about that. Like, yeah, maybe the Palestinians don't want to just be genocided from their own, from Palestine. Like, apparently, Israel is for Jews. No, okay, they have to go. All right, okay.
No one is talking about expelling them. We're talking about giving them...
Oh my God, that body, no one's talking about expel. You see, don't talk about, like before, we don't talk about slaughter, we just do it. Like, we don't talk about it, even though they do talk about it. They just do it.
The right that you have as a British citizen, that I have as an Israeli citizen, to choose where I want to live.
What about Palestinians? They have a right to choose where they live?
And I don't think they've been given this choice. I think the terror organization was controlling the minds and the hearts of the people just for one thing, to become a terror machine against the Israel.
That is a big assumption that the majority support Hamas. Like, again, she doesn't give them agency, and she doesn't give Israel agency. It's like just they're just naturally reacting to this.
And to do those horrific crimes. And I think this radicalism...
But she never mentions Israel's horrible crimes. It's always like, oh, we've got the most sophisticated targeted, and it's like, never takes accountability for any of it. Like, not even like, well, sometimes they will go like, oh, war's tragic, but like, no responsibility at all.
Must stop, and no matter what will be the future in Gaza, and whoever wants to stay there to live peacefully with Israelis, I think education should be the key factor for any future plan, as I said before.
So you think that out of all of this, we could still see a Gaza with many, many Palestinians living there long term?
We have zero problem with the Palestinians. We have a problem with radicals that want to kill and, eliminate Israel. That's the problem, not identity.
So why are you killing the Palestinians then if you've not got a problem with them?
Identity.
And this forever war, as things stand, goes on and on and on. You've got Israeli ground troops moving back into Gaza in large numbers too. We can expect to see headlines of more hundreds of people killed tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after.
I want to repeat my first sentence. It can end today if our hostages will be back and Hamas will surrender.
It won't though, will it? You're not going to end the occupation. You're not going to, end the checkpoints. Are you going to end the occupation? No. Are you going to end the slaughter? No. So why lie? On that depressing note, hit the like button and I'll see you in the next video.